see. Well, it seems like my concerns are
It's telling that we are live on Costume live streaming service, and then I have also YouTube that is telling us that we are online.
Do you think?
Yes,
Okay,
we're live.
I really, yeah, I'm because Zoom just published some kind of update in the software, and that's why I do hope that we are online. But guys, anyway, we will go as we are online, and I just hope that, yeah, it seems like now I have a confirmation. Seems like everything is streaming. I am sorry because I was currently slightly confused. And it's good because Zoom is improving security, and seems like corporate guys, they put Zoom in some kind of blacklist, and as a result now Zoom is trying to, you know, kind of get up to the high corporate standards, you know, in terms of securities and other things. It's good stuff. It's just a little bit kind of headache in terms of technical things. Today's topic is, well, it's powerful topic. And yeah, I would like, John, if you just take everything in your hands, and vulnerability, yes. And is it a great thing? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? You know, so I'm looking forward for all your insights, and you know how we're gonna dive deep into the topic.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Alex. I think this is a great testament to vulnerability because it's been handed over to me and here I am, right? So there you go, the beginning of vulnerability. So first, let me say hello to everyone. Alice, Irene, and of course, Alex. Thank you for joining us today. As Alex was saying, you know, the topic today is about vulnerability. And, you know, do we see it as a strength or do we see it as a weakness? And I think what I'd love to hear from each of you is kind of what vulnerability means to you. And I think if we start in that space, we'll be able to tease out more and more what we know about vulnerability. But I'd love to hear, and I can go around, we can start with Alice in terms of, or Irene, who wants to go first? See, there you go, vulnerability.
I will. I'll
Okay.
be vulnerable.
Okay.
Yeah, so Alice, I'm curious, what does vulnerability mean to you?
Vulnerability for me is the courage to fight the fear, to stand up and show my what I call my weaknesses, to allow someone else to come in and to risk the chance that I might be hurt, I might be embarrassed, ashamed, but still to go forward and stand on that my belief that what I'm doing is more important than the results that might happen from someone embarrassing me or being mean to me. It's just standing out there and saying, here I am.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alice. And Irene, how about you?
Quite similar. To me is the ability to be so open that we can allow heart and everything what's going on to even transform us, because there is no transformation without openness. And showing up with authenticity and transparency. Because the time I say, okay, I'm feeling sad, I'm fearful in this moment, well, you not necessarily have to be, you know, you have to be in the state of drama to show up, but it's okay. I am in this moment right now. So what can do with me? What we can do? What can I do? It's the ability also to ask ourselves questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Irene. And Alex, what are your thoughts about vulnerability?
Well, I'm listening to everyone, and yeah, resonates. Everything resonates with Alice and with Irena. I would just probably kind of just choose different words to describe similar thing. For me, it's vulnerability is practically dropping, shields, or in some ways is not being able to express whatever you feel, and drop shields and drop all kind of considerations, how other people will perceive you, and if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. It's like drop any judgment, just express what you feel. And very often it's not really easy thing to do at all. And I believe in many cultures it's not even it's not even about easy, it's more kind of considered not even wise thing to do. So that's where probably we are going into the next kind of stage of discussion. But for me, it's just dropping your shields.
Thank you, Alex. When you said the shield, what came up for me was also similar is the mask. And we also, we often hear about the masks that we wear, and that moment when we have to take off, or we choose to take off that mask, because it is a process. And it's one often that does require choice. And as Irene was saying, it's this path you're leading, right? And then you're showing up the way you show up in this idea of authenticity. And for, as you said, Alex, as well, and Alice, we're exposing ourselves. We're exposing ourselves to the world. And, the idea that, yes, in many places, this seems to be a weakness. And in others, it's a strength. And I wanted to share, if I may, because I think it's important to kind of maybe bring in the context too. There's a researcher that most of us have probably heard named Brene Brown, who has done extensive research on vulnerability and has written a lot of books around it. And I wanted to share the definition that she's provided, if that would be okay, around what she has seen through her research, what it means to her. And I'm going to read it over here. It says, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. So in so much of her writing, she does talk about this idea of where we come from culturally, like this idea of perfectionism, the fear of making mistakes, the fear of being judged. And so I want to go back out to you and ask, maybe there was a moment for each of you that you might be able to share around when you felt vulnerable and how that might have transformed or changed something in your lives, if you were open to that, and sharing maybe that moment when you recognized that vulnerability or chose to be vulnerable. Irene, do you have any thoughts?
I have tons of thoughts when I show up vulnerable. Well, one was when my father died, and I show up always with vulnerability, even with Alex. I think he remembered that moment, and it was a really tough moment to me. We had a discussion, and he asked me, I feel like you have really a burden on your heart, because he listened the tone of my voice, my energy, all these things, and I told him, I'm afraid my father is going to die. 2 days after I called him, my father died. And this
Yeah.
was one of the moments, because well, you cannot conceal this kind of feelings. No matter how strong you think you are, these kind of feelings to me are even sacred. It's okay feeling this grief. It's okay feeling like that. And the other moment was the loss of the love of my life. He didn't die, but he disappeared completely. No one knows where he is. And I I thought maybe that it's difficult to face, but cutting any relationship, and you know that this person is still alive and you don't understand why, even worse, because there is no possibility to you know, having a relationship or explain what's going on, what happened to us, why this happened. And I never hide this feeling. um, and I don't want, because I'm human. It's absolutely fine feeling like that when those circumstances uh, happen in your life.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you for sharing that. Alice, any thoughts about your own personal experience?
Well, mine is I guess my relationship with vulnerability started, and I was only 6 years old, and I didn't realize what was happening. But I've probably mentioned to you before, when I was really, really young, till I was maybe around 10, I had a really bad speech impediment. And I remember when I was 6, we had this big school assembly that we would have once a month. And I was first grade, and I had my little speech to say. And my teachers, you know, they encouraged me to speak, to help me get over, you know, my shyness. Well, when I remember stepping up to the front of the stage and saying my part. And I remember the whole audience just burst into laughter. And at 6 years old, I didn't cry. I just simply stepped back and I stood there. And somewhere inside, I didn't know it at the time, but somewhere inside, I decided I would never put myself in that position again. And it took me over 45 years before I was able to decide I can't live this way anymore. I mean, and I realized once I started coming out that one incident and the fear that it put in me affected so many things in my life. And now I just decided, you know what? This is who I am. I'm going to show up. And this is who I am. This is the way I'm made. But it was I mean, the fear, I had such a fear of ever stepping out, speaking in public, that I mean, it really controlled my life until I made that decision that I will not live this way anymore. I have to confront it. And once I confronted it, it started getting better, and it's becoming where it was my weakness. Now it's becoming my strength. So that was a big one for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Alex, what are your thoughts in terms of maybe some experience?
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of to pick up some particular cases in my memory, but yes, I would say the majority of cases which come to my mind right now are related to kind of school, studying, university, those areas where you're supposed to be in front of lots of people, and for some reason, for example, you are not ready, or like, for example, one of the cases when I really felt vulnerable, it was actually school time, and I was very good at, I would say, 99% of the subjects, like high grades, highest, but one grade, I hate it. I hate that subject. And my the teacher, I think somehow, she was extremely kind of pushy, and as a result, she was kind of trying to push me probably too hard, and I supposed to speak in front of people. And do you know what the subject is? Can you guess? Well, English. So it was funny. Exactly. I couldn't. Yeah. As a result, it was like a huge, like a stumbling point. I got to the stage where I think my passive knowledge of English words was. One day I calculated it was like a 5,000 words I already knew, and I still couldn't say anything. So it was a serious block. Like yeah. So as a result, it's, I don't know what is the origin. Is it like a bad methodology, or teaching, or combination of many factors? But I do remember that was a very tough kind of, and I really extremely kind of found myself in a very vulnerable situation when I supposed to talk, I just cannot. And after that, I was studying English in university 6 years, and when first time I went abroad, I remember it was like we traveled to Sweden. It was my first ever kind of travel out of Soviet Union, and I supposed to come to railway station and ask and to buy a ticket. I couldn't ask. I couldn't even make one. I couldn't even say I would like to buy a ticket. I just just couldn't speak. Yeah. So that was kind of extremely powerful block when I felt extremely vulnerable. And yeah, over time somehow, as you can see now, I more or less I could I could connect one sentence with another. So there is no really anymore that feeling of being vulnerable and being judged uh, dissolved, disappeared. Yeah, that was my case.
Thank you, Alex. I probably have too many to share. So, but what's interesting is that, in I guess, in this space that you've just shared, and being vulnerable and sharing about vulnerability, because it's important to recognize that those are those moments where you're going back and recalling those feelings and those moments. And I think it's very powerful. And again, yet an example of being vulnerable, but being able to share those stories. And I so appreciate that. And I think also what I'm hearing, and I think is important, is that each one of you shared a very different story. One about loss, one about, for Alice, this idea of being in front of those people who made fun of you, and for Alex, it was just the anxiety around learning English, right? And trying to master that. And so it gives you an idea of all the differences and how vulnerability shows up, right? In each of us, because it goes back, we're individual human beings, and it's going to show up in different places. And I think that's the powerful message, that it can look very different for people, right? And what may happen in their lives. And the last piece I'd like to add is what Alice said, is that it's taking her time in this life journey to get to a place where you've chosen and allowed yourself to be open and to be exposed, and moving through that fear of being maybe rejected, right? But it takes time. And I think that's the other piece to this, is that for some it's immediate. You know, Irene, you said it, in that moment of grief, there's nothing that can hold it back, you know, for some people, and it's there. And for others, they can hold on to it and keep it for a long time, until there's a point when, you know, it's no longer sustainable, or there's a choice that's made. I'm curious, as we think about the times that we're in right now, and this has been the theme of all of our, you know, conversations, you know, this idea of uncertainty, of unknown, and yet how do we allow ourselves to be vulnerable in this time that we're in, and how may it actually help us be able to move through this space that we're in? I'm just curious what thoughts you might have.
No thought.
No
John.
thoughts.
Yeah, I'm looking right now on the screen, and to my surprise, no thoughts. No, I'm joking. Plenty of thoughts. I could start. Yeah. First of all, yeah. If we start with me, I appreciate it. Like, well, vulnerability. I believe that it has a lot to do with the accepting world around you as is. What like, I don't know, at least my interpretation is like this: when we have those shields, when we are concerned how other people perceive us, or when we are concerned, you know, how we look and how other people might, you know, judge our actions and our I don't know, certain particular behaviors, I believe that we are creating, how to say it, we are not just trying to make changes and become who we are not. It's one of the things, or kind of pretend or hide certain feelings. But the side effect of that kind of action is that we are not really taking world around us as is. So I don't know if it makes sense. So when we are pretending or shielding or with some kind of distorting actually the communication between our true self and world around us. So that's my understanding, is that the more we are trying to hide who we are, the more resistance as a result we are offering to the world which is around us. So I believe vulnerability in this case is just the way of smooth communication between who you really are and the world around you as is. So that would be my kind of my interpretation of what vulnerability is and how it is important, you know, to kind of practice it in many ways, really practice it.
Thank you, Alex. Alice, did you have any thoughts, or Irene?
I do. Well, it's kind of like what Alex was saying, because I had such a long struggle with it, that vulnerability changed to fear, and then I had to deal with fear. I've learned from that is that when I allow myself to be open, to be who I am, it also allowed other people to come in and be who they are and to help me with my weaknesses. When I'm constantly trying to be strong and show no vulnerability. You know, I got this. It doesn't allow other people to come in and help me. So by opening myself up, others come and they help me and they help me move forward. And in turn, I can do the same because usually it's a lot bigger in our head than it is in reality. And it allowed people to come in and help me, and it allowed me to do the same for them. And it gave me a whole different mind frame, a different way of thinking, where before it was sometimes, now I call it when you're really vulnerable, it's my standing naked in front of the world moment. I mean, you can't get any more vulnerable than that. You just put it all out there. This is who I am. And so that's mine. Open myself up and other people, it allow other people to come in and help me with whatever I'm vulnerable with.
Wonderful. Thank you. Irene, any thoughts?
Yes, I can second on what they say, especially how do I practice for myself vulnerability in the sense of I am open to acknowledge and recognize when I have these really thought feelings like, well, fear is less now. It's much more anger, wrath, or all these feelings represent the way that we resist to the reality as it is. So when I acknowledge, okay, you are there, you are telling me that, okay, this is not fair, what happened outside. But the other question is, how can I be of help for other people, for myself and for other people in this very situation, in this situation as it is. So this changed completely the way I feel, my energy. And it's kind of what in Aikido martial arts said, blending the energy of the opponent and transform for harmonizing what's going on.
Fantastic. Thank you. And just to kind of add on to that, because you it was this idea of about others, right? And that's a theme that we heard. I believe for myself that when I show up and I'm vulnerable, I'm also helping others feel comfortable in being vulnerable as well. And when you have that energy where two people, and we see this in coaching a lot, but if we open ourselves up and are authentic and vulnerable, it allows the other to often get into that space. Maybe not fully, but that is part of what I believe. And the theme that I've been talking about it so many times is us being able to connect. And if we're open, then the connection is made. When we're closed off or one is closed off, it's harder to create that connection. But I honestly believe for myself that, and this will go right to the title, I believe vulnerability for me is actually one of my superpowers. It is one of those things that when I allow myself to be vulnerable, I am really affecting others out there because they're seeing me as who I am. And to Alex's point, when I'm opening myself, I see the world as it is. It is uncertain. There's no certainty here. This is our reality, but it allows me to be in a calmer space, but particularly for me, it's around connecting with the other, being with them and serving them in some way. And the way I do that is to be vulnerable, to open myself up without fear of rejection. It can happen, without fear of judgment. I can't control what other people think. But, again, it takes time for some people, but I do see this in my eyes as an amazing strength because ultimately, Alice, you said when you're standing there naked, there's nothing else left.
No.
You can't go any further than that. There is nothing left. And once we get in that space of almost being completely naked, you know, we're there. There's nothing that can happen to us. And that's where I go with it. But I'm curious to just kind of, you know, kind of begin to wrap up the conversation. But any thoughts in terms of, you know, we go back to that title and how you see, you know, this vulnerability is strength or a weakness. And I'm curious as we go around, Irene, I'll kind of move around the screen as I see it, but
Yes.
any kind of final thoughts around or the takeaways that you might want to share?
Well, yeah, I will start. Lots of things. Right now, I'm listening to three of you, and again, we are using different words and describing kind of from different, slightly different kind of angles, maybe the vulnerability. And for me, what is resonating the most is that, I don't know, I kind of believe that, I don't know, it's not really Buddhism precisely, but I do believe that world outside of us is kind of reflection of what we have inside. Well, we are looking at world outside with certain particular filters, and the less it's filtered and the less it's distorted, the more real world we see. So as a result, if we consider that the world is almost like a mirror, so if we inside having some kind of armor, I mean, if we are shielding, if we are pretending, if we are distorting what we see outside, a lot of it. We see a lot of pretense around us. We see lots of attacks, lots of fightings. And I do believe that if we would like to make a world a better place, it's supposed to start with our internal world, with our filters. And every vulnerability practice actually make world around us cleaner, softer, kinder, more relaxed, more happier. So I do believe it's a strength, even though to practice vulnerability is not that easy. I think that it's kind of ingrained in the fear of being judged by other people. And as you know, we all social creatures. Millions of years we were in tribes, and the worst which could happen with you, which is equal death, if you are expelled from your tribe, meaning you are judged by others and you just thrown away out of kind of away from your tribe. It's in old times, million years ago, it means death. So no wonder such a powerful fear of being judged by people around you, because in like, you know, at all times it literally means death. So that's why, for example, psychological research shows that public speeches and, you know, all those activities related to people around you considered one of the most difficult people to kind of find, you know, relaxation and kind of drop the you know, fears. So sorry for my long explanation, but that's what I picked up from our conversation.
Thank you so much, Alex. And Irene, and then
Yes.
we'll go to, and then Alice, and then I'll wrap it up.
Well, my personal consideration is about what you said, John, and how powerful is allowing ourselves to be vulnerable as well as our clients, because we can dive deeper as much as we dive deeper with ourselves, with our clients. So we cannot go where we never go from ourselves. So our profession is really interesting because it requires a lot of courage to be vulnerable, completely vulnerable, and see ourselves how we are, and how can we impact the world too. And as Alex said, this practice is very important because in a counterintuitive way, sometimes when we are vulnerable, we can even see worse things, even worse things in the reality. But the difference is that we are not afraid of that. We know that we can impact. We know that we can make a difference. And this is starting by being kinder with ourselves, more gentle with ourselves. Then we can go to be in the world and being kinder, calmer, whatever, and better as soon as we allow ourselves to see and feel and hear the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Irene. Alice, any final thoughts?
Well, going back to the topic, I think for me, my vulnerability became, like you said, my superpower when I stopped allowing it to dictate to me. And then when I made the decision internally that I wanted better and figured out exactly who I was, then it's like now I stand before the world and it's like I am who I am, you know, and I'm perfect in my imperfection. And by accepting that about me, I can accept it about other people. And that way, when they stand before in their moment of vulnerability, I'm there for them. I can reach out to them like they're reaching out to me.
Nice.
Very nice. Thank you, Alice. Yeah, I think, just capturing a few of those points, but the one that resonated the most was this idea of being courageous. That vulnerability is about, for me, courage, because it does take courage to go into that space and open ourselves up. But as you all described, the possibilities of what can happen when we take that path of opening ourselves up and recognizing that it is about being courageous, but the impact that it can have on this world, especially the one that we're in right now. So I want to thank all of you for being vulnerable and for sharing what it means to you. And I think, again, the idea of the strength and the power that vulnerability actually can have on us as human beings. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Alice, Irene.
Thank
Nice.
you.
Nice to meet you, and yeah,
Bye-bye.
hope to see you soon in our next conversation. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.